Now we move on. Iran has strongly condemned the reimposition of UN sanctions over its nuclear program, calling them legally baseless and urging all countries not to recognize the measures. Commenting on the issue, the Iranian Foreign Ministry has stressed that the Islamic Republic will defend its national rights and interests, and any action aimed at undermining them will receive an appropriate response. The UN sanctions were returned on Sunday. Through the snapback mechanism of the 2015 nuclear deal, these sanctions freeze Iranian assets abroad, halts arms deals, and penalties development of ballistic missiles. Additionally, Iranian lawmaker Ismail Khousari has said that Iranian parliament may discuss possible withdrawal from the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, while Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Khalibaf has warned that any country implementing the sanctions will face reciprocal action from Iran, including the 3 European nations that triggered the measures. The UN sanctions come after stalled negotiations with the United States and recent Israeli and US strikes on Iranian nuclear sites, with Iran still maintaining a stockpile of highly enriched uranium near weapons-grade levels. The economic impact was immediate, with currency tracking websites reporting that the Iranian rial hit a record low against the US dollar today. Now for this discussion, we're joined by Ross Feingold. He's a political analyst, joins us live from Taipei. Thank you very much, Ross, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, given that Iran's strong condemnation, and it has said that it will take actions against the countries which implement these sanctions, what do you think Iran means by that?
Certainly, there'll be a lot of rhetoric. We've already seen some, but there'll be more statements, very angry statements from the Iranian government condemning the imposition of the snapback sanctions. They might impose their own sanctions, although that's more symbolic than having any practical effect, given that these countries have sanctioned Iran. But the thing to watch here is really whether or not the Iranian government wants to continue to put itself in this position where they're excluded from most of the international trading system. They're hurting their own people, and then they come to rely on primarily on 2 countries, Russia and China, which have been friendly to Iran, but have their own motivations for doing so, and are not necessarily the best long-term partners for Iran. So ultimately, as has been the case throughout this process, it's up to the Iranian leadership. Do they want to continue to put their country in this worsening economic situation, to be isolated from international trade and other interaction, or do they want to join the international community of nations for trade and other purposes and give up these research programs that really most of the world is condemning?
And Ross, what are the potential consequences for global diplomacy and security if Iran follows through on its threat to withdraw from the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty?
It will harden the position of countries that may have been sympathetic to Iran in the past. And we see that with the European countries, the E3. They've been so engaged in this process, notwithstanding criticism from the Trump administration. They've been willing to extend their hand to Iran to try and find a way out from this. And if Iran continues with its research programs, if it leaves the Non-Proliferation Treaty as they're threatening to do, which would be a huge mistake, then Iran is going to continue to be isolated and become even more isolated. And relying on Russia and China is not necessarily a good long-term plan for the prosperity of Iran or even the stability of the government. But to kind of be frank, this leadership often makes stupid decisions. They've done so for decades, and it's often just about keeping themselves in power and keeping their own people enslaved. But the other countries in the region, they certainly don't want to see this happen. They want Iran to be on good terms with its neighbors. But if Iran continues down this path, then we're going to see more actions like the recent agreement between Saudi Arabia and Pakistan with regard to the collective defense and potentially bringing Saudi Arabia within Pakistan's nuclear umbrella.
And Ross, now looking back at the Pezeshkian's speech in UN, he thanked the countries, probably Iran's friends. He did not mention or name the countries, but people who supported Tehran during this Israel-Iran conflict this year. So how does Iran perceive this role of international allies, maybe particularly about Russia and China? And what do you think about Russia and China, which rejected putting these sanctions on Iran?
There's a distinction between countries condemning Israel's attack on Iran's nuclear facilities and actually wanting Iran to have nuclear weapons. Countries might race to Iran's defense to say how terrible it was for Israel to violate Iran's sovereignty, but at the same time, I don't think many of those countries are saying, yes, we want Iran to have nuclear weapons, and the same might even apply to Russia and China. Certainly, those two countries have some interest in supporting Iran. They have some interest in supporting a counterweight in the Middle East to countries that are under U.S. influence. But ultimately, again, is it in Iran's best interest to primarily rely on two countries? I would say no. Again, I think the Iranian leadership is being extraordinarily foolish and stupid, frankly, and that their best interest is to be doing business and allow trade and the flow of people, primarily with Europe and maybe to a lesser extent with the United States if that was feasible again. But the Europeans have shown a great desire to have a normal relationship with Iran, but even for the European countries, there's clearly a barrier now, which is Iran's pursuit of these weapons programs.
Thank you very much, Ross, for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion.